Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 4 of this Becoming a Confident Leader series. My name is Dr. Mary Meduna Gross. I am an executive well-being coach. And at the core of what we are really talking about on the outside, we're talking about wanting to be confident. But what we're talking about is what do we need to do on the inside so that on the outside, this happens naturally, right? We don't have to put on a mask or a facade of confidence, but really, the question is, how do we create that experience of self confidence and resilience and resourcefulness, a sense of agency? How do we create all of that internally, regardless of what's happening outside of us? And if you've had a chance to listen to the other um, videos in this series, we've talked about what is this primary problem that we're trying to solve, right? What we've said was that although we think that our problems and our sources of our challenges are outside of us, in reality, it's all within us. Now, this isn't, there's no blame here. This is simply where is the responsibility though? Right? If we insist that the responsibility to change lies outside of ourselves, then we're just waiting for the world to change so that we feel better inside. And this, again, this is all what we're here about, is about how do we feel better inside? Because when we have an internal battle going on between ourselves, there's no way. First of all, our nervous system is constantly activated. And when our nervous system is constantly activated, then it sees everything as a threat. And when you start to see everything as a threat, you start to see the people in your world as a threat, even if they're not. That's just the lens now through which you're seeing everything because of this internal battle that you have going on. We talked about this inner battle. I used the a story about the Cherokee and his grandson, and the story of the two wolves that are always battling inside of each of us. And we said that these two wolves, one is our ego, that part of us that wants to keep us safe, that wants to keep us comfortable. And then the other side of us is our soul. And the soul part of us is that part of us that wants to grow and expand. Our soul is connected to the greater consciousness, right? That we're all one. It's me looking at me. It's you are looking at me. It's we're looking at ourselves, right? Because of, if you go back to this idea that we're really all one, and that's where our soul is at. And so our soul is unlimited. um but our ego says, oh no, this is the role that we play, this is where we live, this is how we live, these are the categories that we're in. And we start to set up lots of rules for ourselves within our ego. Our soul doesn't care about any of those categories, because again, to the soul, it's all us. And so I think what we are really here to experience is to experience this expansion of our soul. Some would say this is finding our purpose. Find your purpose. What is it that your soul is here really to experience? And I think that's why we're here, is to experience something. We want to experience ourselves as big and bold and impactful. But with our ego always telling us to stay safe and stay in these lanes, and here's the rules that we have to live by, that is the source of this inner struggle. And that is why our nervous system is chronically activated and on fire. The other thing that we've talked about is we're not in this battle between our ego and our soul. It's not about taking sides. It's really about how do we recognize what each of these parts of us wants for us, because I believe that each part wants the same thing for us. It just has different ways of achieving those outcomes. And so rather than trying to squelch our ego or try to make it wrong for the rules that it lives by, what I have suggested and said is that we actually intentionally and consciously bring love to those parts of ourselves. Now, I have a little bit of a personal experience that I think really highlights this whole experience. So I've been dealing with some health issues recently, and part of the symptoms of these issues includes depression. And I've never experienced depression quite like I've experienced it recently. And it's not just sad, right? It's not just sad, although I was and have had lots of those experience. But really, it was more of that inner chatter kept asking me, "What's the point? What's the point? Nothing's ever going to change. This is how it always is." That was my ego screaming loudly. And in the past, I would have said, "Oh, no, 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 no. That's not the rule I want to live by. That's not who I am." And I would try to make that part of me wrong or just get it out of the way as quickly as possible. But what I've done this time, and I have to say it's made a profound difference in this very intense experience that I've been facing. And that is, as we talked about yesterday, I've decided to love those parts of me that is asking, what's the point? That love those parts of me that says this is never going to change. And I've really taken to heart that every time those stories come up, I ask myself, am I willing to love the part of me that thinks nothing's going to get better? Am I willing to love that part of me that is hurting? There's a lot of physical pain here too. That is hurting. Am I able to love that part of me that doesn't know how to get better? And just by responding to that inner chatter with that intention of love, I have to say, my nervous system didn't quite know what to do with this, right? And it started to relax. Um, not it didn't take away all of the symptoms, but at least I was able to find a space for myself where I was loved and I was safe in spite of what I was experiencing in the moment. So I know these strategies work. They have worked for me. They have saved my life this summer. I don't think that is an exaggeration of the truth. And so for me, this concept about becoming an internally confident leader, regardless of what's happening outside of me, is very personal. This is what I want for me. And so that's why we're talking about this, because I think this is what you are looking for as well. So, what is this confident leader? Let's talk a little bit more about that vision. My vision of a confident leader is one who believes in themselves and in the people and situations that they surround themselves with. A confident leader knows that their vision is inevitable, even when there's no physical evidence to validate this belief. So, if that's true, and I think it is, really confidence comes down to what are our core beliefs? What do we believe about ourselves? And today's conversation is how do we discover what we believe about ourselves? Because for most of us, this is very unconscious. And it's unconscious by design because our ego, again, is responsible for preserving our life. Our life is literally at stake. And that's why our ego takes this role so seriously. And our ego will put up barriers to anything that might challenge the rules that it's living by. That's why change is so hard because this ego side says, no, this we've already come up with the rules for this. We already have a behavior plan for this. We already know what to do. Even if what we're doing or how we're approaching it is creating new problems for us. Our ego says it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's worth the cost. But consciously, you have an opportunity now to say, is it really? Is it really worth the cost? Because your soul is nudging. Your soul is saying, we don't need this. You don't have to live in these self-made cages. You can break out of this and you can break out of this safely. And we can expand and we can become who we are truly meant to be. And it's safe to do so. But it comes down to then, so today's topic is how do we get to those core beliefs? And when we find those core beliefs, what do we do with them? So before we go into that, there's two things. One, I'm inviting you again today to, in the comments, put reset. What we're doing here is we are resetting our nervous system, and we're declaring that today is the day that we're no longer going to sacrifice ourselves for some future outcome or until some future goal or achievement is made. We are saying to ourselves, we are worthy of being loved and cared for now, and that in doing so, this will actually position ourselves to achieve our goals with less resistance, more ease. So, in the comments, type reset. It's doing two things for you. One, it's telling yourself, we're doing this. Oh, okay, we're doing this. And now your unconscious mind is you've given it another job. It has its job, but you've just given it another one. And that job is to say, what does reset mean for me? What would reset look like for me? And what would that do for my family? What would that do for my business? That's what declaring this is going to do for you. The other thing that declaring this publicly and putting that in the comment is you get to join your energy with everyone else who is hitting reset at the same time. Because I believe this is really the only way that we can respond to all of the craziness, all of the craziness, all of the noise that's going on right now, globally, politically, culturally, in every area of our life. It seems like institutions are coming undone, and I think they are, and I think it's time for that. But that also means that we need to be ready for this. We need to be prepared for that, and to be prepared means that we have found balance within ourselves, that ego and that soul. They're interacting, this the yin and yang. They're not fighting with one another. Now they're really complementing one another and supporting one another, and helping us grow and become who we are really meant to be. So I want to reiterate the importance of listening to yourself with love. If you have started to tune into this inner voice, you might have found already how uncomfortable this can be. If you are not prepared to love whatever comes up for you, you are not ready to do this work. You cannot continue to abuse yourself and experience inner confidence at the same time. The energies are incompatible. You have to decide who you want to be. You have to decide which wolf you're going to feed. Are you going to continue to feed that ego and let it get bigger and stronger and more powerful? Or are you going to recognize and nurture the soul part of you and bring that into light so that now the two can work together? So today I want to explore how to get to these core beliefs behind all of this inner chatter. If you started to tune in, you've probably noticed again how much your voice is narrating all of your experiences for you. And what we've said in previous conversations is that this narration is our way of categorizing the information that's coming in so we know what to do with it. that so that we know what to do with it. It's literally telling you a story about what you're experiencing. It's not telling you what you're actually experiencing. Your story is always subjective. What is actually happening is objective. But it's not telling you the objective piece. It's giving you a subjective interpretation of what is happening. Not only what is happening to you, but how you are showing up for other people, or what other people are going to be thinking about this, and how they're going to respond to this, and what this means about the next steps, or what it means about where you've come from in the past. The story that you tell yourself is so complete that your experience always aligns, so it feels like a truth. It may not even occur to you that there's anything to question about your version of the truth. It's just so true for you. So what I'm suggesting is that you not only listen with love, but also with curiosity. Get curious about your story and the beliefs that support this story. Now, this might upend everything that you thought you knew about you and why you do what you do. But again, if you're not willing to love whatever comes up, don't go here. So let's do a quick overview of how we really behave, right? And this has been one of the things that I've been so fascinated about in my leadership and personal development journey is really what makes us tick. Because if it's not what's happening outside of us, then how is it? It's not stimulus response. That's what I was taught in my undergrad and my early years of working with children with emotional challenges. Is we thought there was stimulus and response, and that's partly true. But what that stimulus response model leaves out is that's the story that we're telling ourselves. We think we are responding to an external stimulus when in reality we're reacting to an internal stimulus. So how does this work? So let's imagine something's happened. You know that it's happened because you are receiving information through one or more of your senses. And at a very cursory level, your nervous system has already filtered through this to decide if this is even relevant for you. If it's not relevant for you, you don't even notice it. Think about how many things are happening right now in the space that you're in that you're not even aware of. But your nervous system is, it's taking it all in and it's constantly assessing it. So what we're talking about here is that the data has gotten to you. Your nervous system said, hey, this is relevant. So now you are aware of it. And it's taking in all of the details, not only about what is happening here, but from every experience you have that is anywhere similar to what's happening here, your ego, your nervous system is already assessing all of these past experiences to pull out what did we learn from these? How is this going to apply to this scenario? And that's how we come up with our behavior programs. So we say, when these things happen, here's how I react to it. And so again, we the stimulus comes in, and before we cannot possibly, unless we step into that role of the observer, we are always going to be receiving the subjective version of what is actually happening outside of us. Because then what we do, and that ego again, is based on all of our history and experience, is saying, well, this is what's happening. And here's the program. This is what we do in these scenarios. And so here's what's happening. Before we get to action, it's going to trigger emotions. All right. So here's what's happening. And when these things happen, these are the emotional experiences that come up for us. This is our pattern. This is what we do. This is how we feel in these scenarios. The emotions, energy in motion, then drives your behaviors. You know what? We think something happened and now I'm going to behave. What we missed is this part about our story and the emotions, and that is critical. So our story about it and the emotions that it generates is our version of the truth. And so we act on our version of the truth, and we hope that it creates the results that we're looking for. So that's how our behavior actually works. It isn't stimulus response, stimulus, something happens outside of me, and now all of a sudden I do something about it. In between there is my interpretation of what is happening, what I feel about what is happening, and that drives the behavior programs that I decide to use. Yesterday, or in a previous conversation, we kind of talked about this with that experience of somebody cutting you off in traffic. Depending on the story that you're telling yourself is going to depend on how you respond to it. So if you're telling yourself this person is dangerous, putting me and everyone else on the road at danger, and they should be stopped. This isn't how we should be driving. If everybody drove like this, we'd all be dead, right? I mean, that's where our nervous system, our ego goes. It overgeneralizes to make a point. And so because we've decided that this person is putting us and everyone else at risk, our emotions are heightened in a defensive mode. And because our emotions are heightened in a defensive mode, now we act from that space. And so maybe we speed up, maybe we engage with this driver in some way. That's our behavior. And then we see what happens with that. And if they're going to engage with us, this literally happens. Now, let's flip that around. Let's say that somebody is driving unsafe and they happen to cut you off in traffic, but instead of deciding that they are evil for doing this, you say, "Oh my gosh," you come at it with compassion. You say, They must be in a terrible hurry. I hope everybody is okay." And because you're in this space of compassion, you don't need to engage with them. There's nothing to engage with other than just sending them your best wishes, sending them love, and hoping that they get to their space safely. Now, how do you think you feel after that? So, if you have had this defensive reaction to this, now your nervous system is activated for hours afterwards. It's not just the 30 seconds that this whole event took place. Your nervous system is now activated and it's going to be elevated for hours, which means that whenever you get to where you're going, whether it's to work or home or wherever you're going, you are going to perceive things through this defensive lens. Versus if you perceive this experience through the lens of compassion, your nervous system isn't activated. You arrive wherever you're going, and you're still in this space of compassion. Nothing has pulled you out of that yet. So that's how our behaviors operate. And what this model tells us is that our results, what we do and how we feel about it, is always aligned with the story that we're telling ourselves. It's always aligned. And even when you're doing the right things, that you may not create the results you want until your core beliefs align with the outcome that you really want. So traditionally, what does this mean? When we're not getting the results we want, we simply go back to our behaviors, right? That stimulus response model. The behaviors I tried didn't get the response that I was looking for, and so I'm going to try a new behavior. And what that does is it puts all of our attention on controlling and manipulating the people and events around us so that we get it into a place that we are comfortable with so that we're okay on the inside. Again, what we're trying to do is make the outside world match what we're looking for on the inside so that we can feel safe and comfortable on the inside. I don't have to remind you that this is not sustainable because there's always conflict with what is. And the more we attempt to be right and control situations, the more resistance we generate from others. Now we're automatically feeding our ego, giving it more to resist while our soul sits on the side and gets ignored. So, what I'm suggesting here is that we direct more of our attention and energy to getting to know the rules that our ego defaults to and the aspirations that our soul has for us instead of attempting to control people and events outside of us. So, whenever you're triggered or using an event or situation as evidence as something about you, you're making it personal. We make everything personal. This isn't a judgment. This doesn't make you a narcissist. That's how our behavior system works. We make everything personal. I hope that's what you heard in this whole description of behaviors. We make everything personal about us. And based on that point of view, we decide what to do next. So if that means that if any level of your consciousness believes that you're not enough yet, or that you failed, or that you're alone, or that means that this event is your evidence that these beliefs are true, and it really hurts. So what we tend to do is to put criticism or blame on whatever triggered us so that we don't have to change. We can just ask them to change so that we'll feel better. So here's what I invite us to do with this today. So we have this model now, right? And we've talked about tuning in and listening to our our inner chatter. And that is that first piece, that first action that happens when we are aware of a situation. Before we even have our emotions, before we even decide what to do about it, we're telling ourselves a story. That is the point of intervention. And that's where, when you hear everything about slowing down and taking a pause, that is the space that is needed to get to these core beliefs. And so we hear the story. We hear what our unconscious mind is telling us, where we hear how it is describing and making meaning out of what is happening around us. But again, it wants to align with what has been in the past. So, what I'm offering for you today is when you hear these stories, and especially when you hear stories where you feel this resistance, what I want you to ask yourselves, I've got 4 questions here that I really think help dial into what is the story? What is the core belief behind our story? So we have our story. The first thing that I inquire or invite you to do is to ask yourself, is this 100% true? Because again, our unconscious mind generalizes lots of information. And just because it was true in one scenario doesn't necessarily mean that it's true in another. So the first question that I want you to ask yourself is this true? The second question is, what am I making this mean about me? Now, you could stop with those 2 questions. Is this 100% true? Because that'll break down, help you get to that more objective perception, that observer perception of what is happening. And the second one, how am I making this personal? What I'm feeling triggered, which means that it's personal. So what am I making this mean about me? And 2 other questions that might help are, when have I experienced feelings like this before? And you can think about, if you ask yourself, you will come up with, oh, yeah, I remember when I was 10 years old, I felt like this. Or I remember when I was 13 or 7 or 6. You have a pattern of these kinds of experiences, especially for these experiences that keep coming up. There's a pattern. And the last question that I have for you here is, just ask yourself, is this serving me now? Is this really getting me what I want? And just leave the question there. You don't need a response back. Just ask the question, because again, your unconscious mind doesn't want open-ended questions. It wants everything buttoned up. And so if you ask yourself, is this serving me now? It's kind of open-ended. You can't say yes or no, but your unconscious mind sees this more as an open-ended question. So these questions help you uncover the beliefs that you're operating from. Now, it's probably going to be uncomfortable, which is why, again, it's necessary to be willing to love that part of you that is buying into any kind of story that is no longer, and maybe never was, true for you, but you bought into the story anyway. So we're going to close today with more of those healing mantras about how can we love those parts of ourselves that just doesn't feel very loving. So that's where we're going to close today. Tomorrow, we're going to come back and wrap all of this up, put it all together. But for today, let's just focus on listening to ourselves with love and possibly asking ourselves a few questions to get to what are those core beliefs. And in the comments, hit reset. Make this a declaration to yourself and join others as well. So here are healing mantras. When I'm sad, I deserve more love, not less. When I'm angry, I deserve more love, not less. When I'm confused and don't know where to turn, I deserve more love, not less. When I'm feeling hurt, heartbroken, or ashamed, I deserve more love, not less. Despite what I think, despite what I tell myself, I deserve more love, not less. On my worst days, in my worst moments, I deserve more love, not less. No matter what, I'm able to accept whomever I cannot forgive or whatever I'm unable to love for whatever reason. I deserve more love, not less. Is this enough? Just listening and revealing core beliefs that we're operating from and loving these parts of ourselves? Is that going to get us to becoming this confident leader? Yes, this is exactly where you need to be right now. And as you practice these habits with consistency, you're going to feed your soul. You're connecting, reconnecting with that soul. And your soul is that unlimited source of energy that you're looking for. And the more you feed your soul, this part of you will grow stronger. So tomorrow, come back as we wrap up this conversation around becoming a confident leader through self-awareness. Thank you so much for being with me.